Hello everyone, I'm Rich Lamont and welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, welcome. Glad to have you here. So today I want to talk about some more materials. We're going to talk about hackles today. I've had a lot of questions lately about different kinds of hackles, and I've seen quite a few people asking about it. So I thought I would touch a little bit on hackles that are used mainly in salmon flies and spey flies. So to start off with, we're going to start with some Schlappen hackles and saltwater hackles. A lot of these come in a variety of different colors. You can get them in all different places. Schlappen hackle, you can get great stuff. Feathers MC has some great stuff. Wapsi has some. Whiting has some. And Hareline even has some Schlappen hackles. Some are better than others. I prefer Feathers MC. John McLean has really nice dyed feathers. And he gives you really nice big packages of dyed feathers. So when you get them, there's always a lot to choose from. As I've said before in other videos, when you're working with some flies, you know, there might be one feather in a whole package that will be right for that fly. So when you have a package that has a large selection, I think that really matters. You know, when you look at packages like Wapsi or the Hareline, even the Whiting. The Whiting it's a little bit longer. Some of these are actually really nice for smaller flies. I like to use this for blue charms and small blue doctors. But, you know, if you're looking for the larger flies, if you start getting into larger salmon flies in the 3.0, 4.0, 5.0 even, these Schlappen hackles are great, especially for the throats. A lot of the bodies on salmon flies, they use a mixture of saltwater hackles, which I'll take some out here and I'll start showing you the differences. These saltwater hackles, if you can see, they're a bit more, they're not as webby as Schlappen hackle is. The webbier the hackle, the better it's going to stick together and kind of give you that thicker, fuller looking throat or hackle. So if you want a hackle that you can, you know, really pull back on and kind of control it, let's see if I can find a fly for you really quick. If you look here on this green Highlander, this hackle is quite thick. That's a Schlappen hackle that you can kind of push that back a little bit more. I don't have any of my doctors available right now. They are in the process of being framed. Those I used a different hackle with. But as you can see here, these are also very long fiber typically with the saltwater hackle. So these make great wings. If you're going to do whole feather wings, they make great wings for that. And if you can find the ones in the bag that, like I said, you know, if you sort through, you can find different sized ones. Some are thinner, some are thicker. Some have more of a taper to them. Typically, the saltwater hackles don't have a whole lot of taper, whereas with Schlappen hackles, you can find some that have much more taper to them. I'll use these two, for example. All right, so this one here, you can see it's got kind of a nice pointed taper on it, but then when you take the fibers and you start stretching them out, does it still taper the same? For the most part, yes. So for that, you can actually see, and just lay a hook on that. And you can kind of get an idea of the taper on that. Now if you look at this feather, does it have a taper? Sure. but the taper's not as pronounced. It's more of a blunt tip. And if you look at the feather fibers, they're much sparser. This is webbier. This is going to stick together more. This one will, you can take this, and see how that stays back like that? Whereas with the saltwater hackle, you don't get that. Saltwater hackle doesn't tend to stick together as much. So if you're looking for a more sparse type hackle, this would probably be the better one. But if you want it to be a little bit sparse, you could always strip one side and then just wrap just the one side of the hackle, and that can give you a little bit lighter hackling. But now if we go through this same package here, we'll find this one here is even webbier still, but this one's got a bit more taper to it. And if we were going to go through that saltwater hackle bag, you're probably going to find that the majority of them are right around that same shape. There's going to be very few in here that are going to be any differently shaped or have a different taper to them. Some may be a little bit smaller than others, which is good for smaller flies. And then the other hackle that's used is these saddle hackles. Which I think it really comes down to personal preference. I know there's some guys that prefer to use the saddle hackle over Schlappen. Some guys will mix the two together. These saddle hackles, if you can't get a hold of the saddles themselves, you can get strung saddle hackle. Now, strung saddle hackle, as you can see, you get quite a few, all mixed together. Some are quite thin, like this, and some are quite thick, like this one up front. But we'll use this one. But they've all got slightly different tapers to them, with kind of a webbing down the middle that's thicker, but towards the edge it's not, which actually makes for great body hackle. And then towards the end out here, it becomes webby, so you can actually blend it from going from your body hackle, and then you can get one or two good wraps of this webbier stuff here and begin your throat, and that can give you a little bit of a thicker pronounced throat, depending on the pattern that you're tying. This gray was not a good choice to use here. But these strung saddle hackles, you can get these. Look on eBay. You can look at most fly shops will have a selection of strung saddle hackles that you can get from a bag. It's easier to find the strung ones than it is to find the actual saddles. Alright, so now we've got a couple of different kinds of Schlappen hackles. We've got a couple of different kinds of, and of course, put this one away. A couple of different kinds of the saltwater hackle and our saddle. And we've got some neck hackles, which this is a rooster neck that I've got. This one here is almost no webbing. As you can see, the majority of this one as well. It's going to have very little taper to it. These are good for throats or sparse hackling that you want to use for, any of your salmon flies or spey flies. As you get farther down into the neck towards the base, you can start getting into some larger feathers, which are great for wings, for some streamers and things like that. But you can also use these shoulders and some of these for your throats, like down in here. If you can get to some of this, even though it's short, you can get a good 1 or 2 wraps of some really nice webby hackle right there. That'll be great for some throats. But these are nice and long. This is a whiting neck. And you can get your smaller necks, these hen necks, which are good for smaller salmon flies, hairwing salmon flies. These are also good for like the Irish wet flies, especially with these smaller hackles down here. Getting into the smaller wet flies, those would be great. But typically for actual salmon flies, the only thing I could see is maybe using some of these for like maybe a cotinga sub. I don't think that would be very bad. I've never done it, but it doesn't look like it would be a bad sub for that. Now we're talking spey flies. Spey flies are a bit different. The hackles for them have a tendency to be more longer and sparse, which is why golden pheasant is actually a really good hackle to use. And it's not just the breast feather from the golden pheasant. The rump also has yellow. Here, I'll pull some out. These yellow rump feathers are also very nice for spey flies. These would be good on smaller ones. Now, even though I'm showing you all of these right now, in a few minutes we're going to go over to the vise, and we're going to try wrapping a few of these onto a hook so I can show you how they act and what they do and how they look on a hook itself. So with the golden pheasant, the breast and the rump are really what is looked for. And the other that's used is some gray heron, which people dye black to have black heron. Heron hackles are what are actually really mostly used for a lot of spey flies. Lady Caroline, a Glen Grant. Oh, excuse me, not the Glen Grant, I'm sorry. But the Lady Caroline here, as you can see, that's got heron dyed black. And you can see why. This one here would be for a much larger fly. The black dog is a classic salmon fly that actually does use heron. I don't have one of those here, so I cannot show you. But that does use heron. And then you can get into the artistic side of things and use heron as a throat and really nice hackle. Typically, what you would do to tie this in is find the very tip of it up here, which these up in here, and we would tie these off, clip them here, tie that off, and then actually wrap with the hackle, splaying outward. Now, heron is not always easy to come by, so there's a few things that you can use for a substitute for the hackle for heron. One is blue-eared pheasant. Which blue-eared pheasant is not quite as long and thin as the heron is, but it's a good close second. And what it'll do, you can get a lot of the smaller flies with all of this up here. Down in here along where the rump is, where all the bigger ones were. I don't have any of those. This was a partial that I had gotten. But these are great for smaller spey flies that you're going to fish with, not so much the artsy ones. But then the other option for that as well for smaller spey flies is American coot. Which again, this would be for a lot smaller spey flies, but it's almost the same looking as that blue-eared pheasant, just on a much smaller scale. So if you're going to be tying, number 8s or maybe even number 5s, it might work with. You can dye some coot black, you can dye it red. You can play with it a little bit, but it works well as a sub for heron. It does have some longer ones, but again, like I said, it's not quite as big as the heron is. Other things for throats as well, just happened to think about it, is guineafowl. Strung guineafowl makes a wonderful throat. And you'll see it in a lot of patterns. A lot of the doctors have this in the throat. And if you actually look, there's a lot of flies that require blue jay or Eurasian jay. And this is actually a great substitute for that. So with the guineafowl, you just strip back all the fuzz. That's not going to get used. And you can pull it all out like this. And you can fold it and double it over. You can do this with most of the hackles, but double it over and take that and tie that right on as your throat. And that is your Eurasian jay substitute. I'm pretty sure guinea feathers are pretty easy to come by. You can just about get them anywhere. This is a bag just from Hareline, just for the few that I use. Eventually, I'm sure I'll get a skin and dye it blue, but for now, this works plenty for me. Okay, so those are the main hackles that a lot of people use in salmon flies and classic salmon flies. So let's go over to the vise now and take a look at how they actually act when you wrap them onto a hook. Oh, okay, so now we're at the vise, and I've got a hook here, nothing special, just threw it together. So we're going to start by tying in the blue Schlappen hackle, the long, narrowed, tapered one first. So this was the one that I think I like this one the best. If you look at it, look on the hook here. See that taper that it's got. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up the feather a little bit. And we're going to hold that spot there and double over the hackle. That'll just help that hackle splay out a little more and give you a thicker hackle wrap. So now this will be right about where the second turn of tinsel will come across the top of the fly. So that's where we're going to tie in. We'll wrap forward, and we'll pretend that, you know, the body on this is nice and beautiful, and then we'll wrap our tinsel. And I'm leaving part of that because I'm going to be taking this back off again. But now for this hackle, make sure it's folded back. And as you wrap it, make sure it tucks in behind that tinsel. What that does gives you a nice thicker, fuller gives you a thicker, fuller hackle. And at the end, after you've wrapped it, you can usually get a turn or two for your throat. Come on now. I'm not going to snip that off. I'm going to save the feather, but as you can see, that leaves a nice kind of gives you a nice hackle that you can sweep back a little bit. You've got that little bit of a taper to it right there, and then when you tie in your next material for your throat, that material should match this. So if you're using a different colored hackle, it should match the length on this. If you're using guinea hen, you should get it to match the length on the very longest part of your hackle. Okay, now for the saltwater hackle. Again with this, I'm going to tie it in by the tip. Like I said, this isn't a pretty job. This is just to kind of get an idea of how it looks and how it acts. Let's get the tinsel wrapped real quick. Alright, now with this one I'm just going to slowly palmer it back as I wrap it. It's important to splay it out though to the side like this and spread these fibers out before you do this. And make sure you get a really good wrap on it. So as you can see the difference already between this and the Schlappen. The Schlappen was much webbier. It was able to be swept back more. Whereas with this, as you can see, it's more splayed out. It sticks more straight out from the hook shank. And let's say we're going to make the throat right here. You can see what happens when we try to make extra wraps, and you have a much more different effect from this feather than you do from the Schlappen. So that's kind of one of the differences between the two there, and why that they're not used so much as throat feathers and major hackle feathers for larger flies. So let's pull that one off, and then lastly I'm going to show you the golden pheasant. So now usually with a golden pheasant, that's more along the lines of if you're using it for a hackle, it's going to be for more of like a Spey fly, usually. And that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what it is, but you can use it for whatever you want, really. Spey flies, usually you tie them in closer to the front of the hook. Obviously this is not a Spey hook. So for this, what you would do is find the longest parts and then strip off everything behind that. And then everything in front of that is the hackle that you're going to use. So you'll take that and pull that back like that. You do the exact same thing with heron or with coot or blue-eared pheasant. Any of those. Okay. Same thing. You take these and you kind of sweep them back. You'd probably more double these first than you would anything else. But if you actually watch here, this is a little bit far forward to be tying in, but you can see the effect that you get from these. You get a very long, stringy, but swept back looking hackle. Oh, one other feather. Some teal feathers. Touch on that for just a second. Excuse me. teal feathers can be used for hackle as well. They're a little bit tougher to work with. Curvature of the feather and some of the way that they behave, they can be kind of bears. But there's a couple of ways you can do it. With a teal feather, you kind of peel away all this fluff, and you'll notice that some of the longer parts, they kind of have a weird twist to them. You can pull those away if you want. Now you can either wrap teal doubled over, or you can wrap it single-sided. First we'll double it over and I'll show you. So we'll tie that in. I'm not snipping anything off or anything. But then as you wrap it, just pull it back. Keep pulling it back as you wrap it. And as you can see, I can rotate the feather with my fingers. You want to make sure you have control of that as well. And now there you are. A teal throat wrapped in. And you can see some of the feathers get a little bit out of control. But if you keep them pulled back and swept back, you can get a really nice hackle out of them like that. And when you're doing some spey flies and even salmon flies, hair-wing salmon flies, this works really well. Pardon me. So those are your teal feathers and your golden pheasant feathers. I'll go ahead and take these right back off. And I realize I have one more feather for you all. I wanted to show you the regular saddle hackle versus the rest of these. Got myself concerned about time on this and almost forgot. So, here is a regular saddle hackle. Which again, if we tie this one in by the tip, or close to the tip, wrap all the way forward, more tinsel, terrible, but that's okay. And then we just palmer it back and then wrap it back as we go. Now with saddle hackles, such as these, if you can Get a good one that's got a real nice deep taper on it, or deeper taper than this, I should say. They work very, very well for salmon flies. But ones like this that kind of have they don't have a real steep taper on them, you could wind up with kind of a strange little shape right here, or even it'll be there'll be a flat spot right there, and then it'll drop off into the longer parts. But if you can find the right ones with the right taper, they can really be great for making salmon flies. And I want to show you one more while I'm at it. I know I don't usually worry about time, but this evening is running short on me already. Alright, so you guys saw what the saltwater hackle looked like with one side, with both sides, and one side was it was doubled over. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull all the hackle on the one, all the barbs on one side, and by doing that we're effectively thinning it out, which you'll see in just a moment the advantage to that. When you're doing some floss body flies, and some of the other classic salmon flies, you know, if you want to see more of the body and you don't want it to be so thick and fuzzy, you can do this. No, I completely missed that. There we go. This kind of eliminates your need to double it back, but you should still pull it back as you wrap. And just the fact that it's saltwater hackle I'm using on this one doesn't really matter. You can do this with Schlappen, you can do it with any of your hackles, including teal. Teal, you can get a thinner throat by doing that. I'll do another one right here in just a minute so you can see the sparseness of it. So as you can see right here already, you can see how much thinner that already is compared to the last time I did this. I should have done them together side by side, or one right after the other, but as you can see, that's significantly thinner, significantly different. And all I did there was just remove the hackle fibers from one side. Get that out of the way. And let's get a random teal feather. Alright. Unfortunately, I do not have a large bag of small teal. I have a large bag of big teal. Well, bigger. Okay. So here's some. I don't like this feather. Okay. That feather was a little bit on the twisted side, so we'll use this one. So now what I'll do is I'll strip off this one side here. And strip off the fuzz off the other. And ruin the feather. That's one thing about teal, is you have to be kind of careful when you're working around the tip. And yeah, that's why you wind up destroying the feather. And if you ruin the tip on the feather, then you wind up not really having anything to tie in at. So, alright, let's do this again. So find the tip, grab hold of that, and pull the rest of this out to the side. Now where we're going to tie in, I'll shorten that down, trim off some of the excess, and then we'll just tie in right here. Now, when you're wrapping away from you, if you're right-handed and you're wrapping away from you, you're going to want to take this side of the feather off so you can wrap effectively this way. You can reverse wrap towards you, but if you're going to do that, or if you're left-handed and you're wrapping the opposite direction, you're going to want to pull this side of the feather off instead. That way you can have this bare part of the rackus up against the shank of the hook. And then when you do that, just make sure you pull it backwards as you wrap. And as you can see, you have a much more sparse hackle from your teal. Again, this was just a demonstration. This wasn't meant to be anything spectacular. Just so you can get an idea of how the different materials react to being put on the hook and wrapped around them. Because once you start actually strapping them to a hook, that's when you'll really see what the feathers are going to do. You can pull them, you can play with them, but until you actually put them on a hook, it's a little bit difficult to know exactly how they're going to react. So the more you do that, the more you play with them, and the more that you tie them in, the more you're going to see how they act, and the more you're going to be able to tell which feathers to use, which ones not to use, and how to effectively size your hackles. So, that being said, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you got any comments or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below. If you see something that I can improve on, please leave that in the comments as well. I'm always open to any suggestions whatsoever. You know, I heard another fly tyer said this to a beginner: we're always evolving, we're always learning. So, you know, I'm always willing to learn, I'm always willing to take advice. If you guys, you know, like the channel, subscribe. You know, subscribing is going to help me out. Don't forget, this Thursday is the giveaway. The giveaway is for this fly right here. This was a Delta Wing salmon fly I tied a couple weeks ago. Now, if you haven't seen that video, you can go back and check that out. It's titled Tying a Delta Wing Artistic Salmon Fly. So, to get entered, all you have to do is be a subscriber and go to that video and leave your name in the comment section below. And on Thursday, I will do a live video and do a drawing. And one of you lucky winners will win this fly. If I draw your name, I will get in touch with you or find a way to get in touch, and I'll make sure that this gets out to you. And just a quick little view at what's upcoming. What can I tie with these? All these materials may not be used, but these are the general idea of what I'm going for. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and have yourselves a wonderful night. Until the next video, tight lines, everyone.